This video is for learning target 3.3. I can identify the number and types of solutions of a quadratic function we'll have by finding its discriminant. So far in the previous learning targets, you've been working very hard at learning the quadratic formula, which is used to solve for a quadratic equation or solve a quadratic function. In this section, I will show you some notes that can tell you about the discriminant, which will tell you how many solutions there are, where the quadratic formula will tell you exactly what they are. So let's start looking. The quadratic equation is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Sometimes you've seen it equal to y or f of x. Sometimes you've seen it equal to another number, and you had to move things over to make it equal to 0. Those are all things you should be comfortable with. If you look on the left side of this paper, they've got the quadratic formula written out for you. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's used to actually solve a quadratic equation. That tells you the solutions. Now, part of the quadratic formula comes the discriminant. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac part. It is under the square root. It's the number under the square root. That's used to find the number of solutions to a quadratic equation. This is when we're not concerned about what they are, we just want to know how many there are and what kind they are. So for example, if you have a positive number under the square root, that is when your b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. That's a positive number. A positive number has two square roots, plus or minus, so the equation has two solutions. Specifically, it has two real solutions. All the kinds of numbers you've been working with so far are all real numbers. You have not learned different kinds of numbers yet. The next scenario is when you have 0 under the square root. 0 only has one square root, itself. So the equation has one solution, more specifically one real solution. The third scenario is when you have a negative number under the square root. That is when your b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. So I'm going to write negative. That's when it has 0 real solutions. It has solutions, they're just not real numbers. They're not numbers you've been able to work with. If you try to type in the square root, in your calculator, try to type in the square root of a negative 25, you're going to get the error message, non-real answer. That doesn't mean there is no answer, it just means that it's not real. So anytime you have a negative square root, you can have 0 real solutions, or what's called 2 complex or 2 imaginary solutions. We will learn more about imaginary numbers in the next learning target when we start solving equations. Right now, all you have to know is that you can have 0 real, 2 complex, or 2 imaginary. So we are going to refer back to this graphic organizer, and we're going to go through some problems. We're not going to go through them all. We're just going to go through a few to make sure we understand the concept. So if the discriminant of a quadratic equation is negative 6, so they've already done the math for me. I haven't had to do anything. So they're telling me the discriminant is negative 6. They want to know how many solutions. So I'm going to go look all the way up here at my negative column. And I'm going to look down at my chart, and I'm going to see that it has 0 real, or 2 complex or 2 imaginary, which I don't have much room for. Any of those 3 are correct, so I can write down any of them. I probably want to write them all down, so I know them all. So if it has a discriminant of negative 6, it has 0 real, 2 complex, or 2 imaginary solutions. Now if you look at number 2, this looks a lot like the first learning target you did in quadratic functions, or solving for quadratics. Identify A, B, and C. So hopefully at this point you can see that A is 2, B is negative 5, and C is 3. Now then they ask me how many solutions. Now remember, I don't need to use the formula to figure out how many solutions, I just need to use the discriminant. And the discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac, the part under the square root. So I'm going to refer back to my number 2. B squared is b is negative 5, so I'm going to square it. Minus 4, and my a is 2, and my c is 3. When I go through and simplify that, I've got 25 minus 8 minus 24, and that gives me 1. 1 is a Is it a positive number? Is it 0? Or is it negative? Well, 1 is a positive number, so I can look down my chart and see that it has 2 real solutions. So it's as simple as that. There they gave me the quadratic equation. I had to pick out my A, B, and C, calculate it, and I got 1. I would get 2 real solutions. If I worked out the actual quadratic formula, I would have 2 answers. That's where the 2 real solutions comes from. In number 4, if you notice, you've got x squared minus 12x equals negative 36. Now, again, think back to your previous learning targets. It is equal to negative 36. I need to make it equal to 0 before I can calculate the discriminant. Just like I had to make it equal to 0 before I could use a quadratic formula. So I need to add that 36 over. And because there's nothing to add it to on the left side, my new equation is x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. That makes my A 1, B negative 12, and C 36. From there, because it asks me how many, it doesn't ask me what are the solutions, it asks me how many. So I just need to use the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So it's going to be negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36. That gives me 144. And 4 times 36, let's go 144, and that gives me 0. Because I have a discriminant of 0, I'm going to go back up to my charts. It's not positive, it's not negative, so I'm going to look in this middle column where it's equal to 0. And I see that it has 1 real solution. So I'm going to scroll back down, and I'm going to put 1 real solution. That is the basic concept of the discriminant. You just calculate b squared minus 4ac. If it's a positive number, it's going to have 2 real solutions. If it's 0, it's going to have 1 real. And if it's a negative number, it will have 0 real, 2 complex, or 2 imaginary.